most of our agriculture goods. So this could be dairy, meat, eggs, but also including a lot of vegetables and fruits. We predominantly rely on U.S. Import. So livestock industry is fairly small.
Welcome to MeatsPad. In collaboration with the American Meat Science Association, it's a platform dedicated to share breakthrough knowledge that is accessible to the global meat industry. On each episode, you'll have the opportunity to listen and learn from meat specialists and professionals about the whole meat industry. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Meat Export Federation,
U.S. Pork,
Ultrasource, equipment and supplies for the meat and food industry, Viscofan Collagen Casings, the best alternative to animal gut casings for a better taste and sustainable sausage making, EFA, slaughter and meat processing tools.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. Today, we continue our conversations. Recently, we had Dr. Dominic from Puerto Rico to speak about the opportunities and in the island. That case was Puerto Rico. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the meat industry growth occurring in Guam. And to speak about that, I have a colleague that we've been discussing about this conversation from what, like almost 6-8 months now, and I think it's time. Here is about 7 p.m. In the afternoon. Over there is 10 a.m. But I'm excited because we're talking now. Dr. Liu, welcome to MeatsPad. How are you?
First of all, thank you for the welcome. I'm doing great, and it's finally nice to see you. Your face, other than it's just the phone, Francisco. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Yes, I think it was about time, and I would like to start this conversation right on. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing for the meat industry. You have a very unique background because you're originally from Taiwan. It's always interesting. Coming from overseas. Originally, I'm not from the States. I'm from Mexico, and coming here to study and then kind of applying what you know in your own countries. And I get to do that quite a bit because a lot of the knowledge that I get, I transfer that into the Mexican meat industry or Central America and South America. And I think we kind of related from that perspective. So I think I don't want to bore the audience, but just tell us about that and what you're currently doing in the island of Guam.
Yes. First, I'm gonna give a little bit information about my position over here. So currently, I'm employed by the University of Guam as an animal scientist. Um, uh, Most of my responsibilities is actually in extension over here. So I don't necessarily focus on the meat science side, but a lot of the livestock side. Otherwise, it's a lot of teaching, and then also I do have research percentage. So over here at Guam, we have a fairly small industry. Guam is a fairly small island. It's a U.S. territory, and it's fairly close to Southeast Asia. Our population is roughly around I would say 130 to 150,000. But before COVID, we had very large amount of tourist attraction. And then we also have a fairly big military base over here on Guam from the States. So, and our livestock industry, has been shrinking quite substantially. When I first came over here in 2021, a lot of people that I get to meet, and when I talk to a lot of these livestock producers, they would talk to me about back in 1990s or very early 2000. They said Guam was fairly self-sustainable, but nowadays, even though without strong data to support, most of our agriculture goods, so this could be dairy, meat, eggs, but also including a lot of vegetables and fruits, we predominantly rely on U.S. Import. So livestock industry is fairly small, just because the cost is so high, and also part of it having the issue without having a lot of resource to really make livestock production sustainable over here. Part of it also plays with I would say, the mindset or the cultural. over here at Guam, it's fairly different from the States or even from Taiwan, where I'm from. I'm going to just stop here.
No, and it's interesting, and maybe you can elaborate more on when you are arriving to Guam. And I think one of your responsibilities in the university, but also as extension, is to develop or help local meat processors, right? So, and I think that's a very unique, because I mean, I guess you can tell us more about how you do about developing, because it's there. You said it's been shrinking for quite a while now. But how do you
Mhm.
create a like that those fundamentals and those foundations to grow the meat industry or the livestock, first of all?
Mhm. So, in order to really get into that, I'll give a little bit more insight on what the current livestock industry looks like, because essentially the meat industry is the terminal industry for livestock, or at least part of the livestock. So when I arrived here at 2021, and of course I was very eagerly to meet the livestock industry, but essentially at this point, we're looking at for swine producers, and there's probably 20 to 30 in Guam, and none of them are actually producing for using it as a source of financial income. So when you visit their facilities, we're looking at two sows, three sows. So the biggest one I've seen is probably 4 to 5 sows. So it's really, really small at this point. It's barely, barely there. And as for poultry, which is the more popular one, there's a lot of backdoor farmers over here. So we're looking at any numbers between 5 to 10, all the way up to larger producers would probably range from 200 to 1,000 flocks. And people are still in the mindset of, backdoor farming. So none of the practice is really like the States. And most of these birds are just laying hens. So people do have a desire for fresh eggs over here on Guam. And regardless the price, to produce over here on Guam, it's fairly expensive. For a dozen of eggs, they're charging for $6.5 or more, but people still want it. So that's kind of gives you an idea of the market. And just because poultry is so much easier to raise over here on Guam. So when I was brought over here, like I mentioned, though, even though the position is called animal science, so I don't necessarily focus on meat science, but that was at the time when there was a very big discussion on starting a USDA inspected slaughterhouse over here on Guam. So I think it was with intention that they brought someone like me with a more emphasis in meat science and muscle biology to Guam. And as for how I have been helping with the farmers and developing programs is we start with more of the workshop. So, in order to get to the meat part, we really have to have enough livestock producers. One of the things that people don't realize, or part of the people might realize, is Guam is essentially a way smaller version of Hawaii, and a lot of the challenges over here are very different from the States. Per se, one of the biggest thing that hinders the process of pursuing this slaughterhouse is what are the actual production over here on Guam? And we don't have any strong data to support that. But with that being said, what brought to my mind is if we bring in a mobile slaughterhouse, we would barely have enough animal to keep it open, you know. And with the weather over here on Guam, the humidity and the salt from the ocean, a mobile slaughterhouse could easily just rust away within the times of half year to a full year, So we have to be very strategic, and things needs to work with each other very smoothly, or else we're wasting a lot of resource just because of bad timing. So a lot of the things that I do over here is helping people to be more efficient in their livestock production. And also on the side, I've been doing a couple of barbecue boot camps. So we talk about, meat science. We talk about food safety for meat science. That's kind of my segue into a lot of the slaughtering process. It's hard for us to really get livestock to demonstrate how to slaughter. But in the past, the workshop that I've done, we had collaborations with other unities, and they were able to provide us reasonably fresh wild boar uh, carcass or just the dead pig, right? So these are dead within the 4 hours, and we were able to demonstrate on that, and then teach people, things such as HACCP plans. Where are the critical control points? Importance about E. coli, Salmonella, and other kind of foodborne illness pathogens. And so that's kind of how we're slowly introducing the or actually starting more focus or even just more education to better prepare our task force if, let's say, a mobile slaughterhouse were to happen in the next couple of years. Additionally, you mentioned you've been talking to Dr. Dominicans from Puerto Rico. So I don't know if they mentioned about the MPP program from USDA. We are also part of the program, and I'm starting a 1 year certificate, which will include meat science. We will include food safety, and then HACCP, and then also last would be agriculture econ course to better help people or prepare them and equip them with tools that they'll need to, even just starting something as a backdoor, how do you make it safer, right? So
Yeah.
on the custom slaughter side. And then hopefully we get enough recruit from not only just Guam, but also all these other islands. We're surrounded by 7, 8 islands that are, fairly everyone kind of has their own struggle when it comes to agriculture, but we're all in the area where we really want to be able to be more self sufficient, just because, at a genre like this, ever since COVID, we're running into issue with very unstable shipment of fresh goods to Guam. It's more common than I would like to see. Half the shelves are empty at our local supermarket. And if that's the case for us, then a lot of the other islands would probably be worse, to be honest. Yeah. So,
And
yeah.
and and I think that that's just one of the main things where we're here. I mean, that education component, and I wish Dr. Bass was here, because that's one of our foundations, trying to educate not only within the university, but also getting out there and speaking with small processors. And I would like to know, and I'm not sure if you have the data handy, but what's the livestock, beef population in Guam, or do you have any data about that, or just generally?
Yeah, I currently don't have any data over here, but I could share the perspective where, in early 2000s, when I talked to these livestock producers, they would tell me back in early 2000s, you would see people with roughly 100 pigs, not sows, 100 pigs at farm, and they probably had a good 10 to 12 producers, somewhere between 10 to 15 producers that were on that scale back. So you can tell that that's probably the majority of livestock. With that being said, local culture also has a significant tie with cattle producing. Regardless of the efficiency and the sustainability of that, there are populations like that. But uh, that's one of the struggle that ever since I worked over here on Guam is it's fairly hard to get any solid uh, data per se. If you Google and you search for data, it's pretty much non-existent when it comes to agriculture. You get some very old data that seems promising or more robust back in early 2000s and 1990s, but I would say after 2010 it's been very hard, and that's something that we have been trying to do. But Guam has a very unique culture of its own, so collecting these data, even when we're done with it, it's really hard to say how far we can really represent. And I'll use an example. Over here, our Department of Agriculture claims that there are over 200 bona fide farmers on the island. But when it comes to the actual farmers co-op over here, the more active ones, we're looking at maybe 40 to 50. So there's still a good chunk of farmers that are not necessarily represented or participating with the whole community. And at this point, it's hard to tell if it's a matter of one, maybe they are super tiny micro scale farmers where they're just trying to self-provide, and being bondified just helps them with a lot of tax break or whatnot. Or two, it could be politics related. I mean, not all farmers get along with each other and things like that. So, with that being said, that the bona fide farmers are already have a more structural organization, whereas for livestock association right now, we have a very small number of of members, so it's hard to really gauge, what are the actual numbers.
Yep.
I would share though that even though I say that we're a tropical island over here, it's fairly hard for lives for cattle's, but there is an island that is not too far away from us, and they have cattle population, I would say roughly around 2,000 to 3,000. Very small island, more cattle than human over there. So it is something that can work around the area. But again,
What's
there's no
the
hard
name of the
data.
island?
Yeah.
What's the
The island is called Tinian. So it's closer to Saipan, small population. If you ever had the chance to travel over here, and you talk to anyone about, say, hey, I really want to do cattle, everyone is going to point you to that direction, saying Tinian has good cattle. And I've been there in person. They actually have a mobile slaughterhouse in place too, because the producers over there do want to uh, uh, make a living and start selling their goods. But from my understanding, it's also been fairly challenging. Yeah.
it was the typical genetics? I mean, being a tropical environment, would you expecting more Bos Indicus influenced cattle or what? Yep.
Yes. Yes. So a lot of time it's that breed and or a crossbreed, or maybe Brangus is very big over there. So typically your heat endurance cattle's, and then of course no dairy livestocks over here, or at least dairy cattle's. You'll find some goats here and there, but again the numbers are fairly hard to estimate.
The mission of the USMEF is to increase the value and profitability of the U.S. beef, pork, and lamb industries by enhancing demand for their products in export markets to a dynamic partnership of all stakeholders. Simply put, USMEF is putting U.S. meat on the world's table.
So the primarily let's say the subprimals or the beef that you get in Guam will be from this island, or it comes from the States directly?
So majority would be from the States.
Okay.
Time to time, I'll see Tyson, I'll see IBP. And then there are also other distributors that gets their beef from Australia. I'm not sure if I've seen New Zealand. But also, if you go to higher end distributors, you'll also find, small sections from Japan. But that's pretty much it. Majority, I would say easily over 80-90% is still from the States.
I remember speaking over the phone about this storm that went through Guam not too long ago. What, like maybe 8 weeks
Yes.
ago? Okay, please
Yes.
tell us about this, because I find this very interesting, because you're trying to talk about a self-sustainable population in Guam, and all of a sudden this happens, and all the shipments, they stop going to there, and you don't have
Mm-hmm.
Wi-Fi, you don't have electricity, you don't have water, and I think
Yes.
this is a challenge and opportunities across not only Guam but a lot of islands, right? But how was that situation?
Yes. So, from my understanding, a lot of the livestock producers do suffer a very strong hit by the typhoon Marwar, and after that, people over here they like to say, "Well, now we're on survival mode," and when they say that, they really do mean it. At this point, it's there will be a time where it's very struggling to manage between work and just trying to get your life put back together. And I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, just how big this typhoon is this time, and then also the lack of electricity and communication because radio station has been out for a long time. You don't have your phone, not even your land phone working, so it's hard to get any useful information on how do you put your life or your house back together. Um, and then let alone with livestock producers, a lot of time I would say it's fairly fair to say that, the farmers who are livestock producers over here, they're really bad at record keeping. Okay. So, especially at times like this when natural disaster happens and they need a tax break or they need to start filing, their lost. There's really no evidence in supporting them. So a lot of time these farmers they just won't recover because they simply won't be able to financially make it back because they won't be able to get the resource to help them. And a lot of that comes back to, you know, a lot of the collection of data. Um, and even nowadays, I mean, uh, we still hear a lot of farmers are don't even uh, have a lot of struggles just trying to get the agency from Department of Agriculture to come and inspect their loss too. Just because a lot of time we are so spread thin, and so a lot of these takes a lot of time. But again, the farmers can't necessarily wait for 2 months without trying to get their farm back in stage. So waiting, it's a really a big struggle. One of the things that I do notice also is, because shipment is delayed because a lot of the fresh goods are going bad without electricity, that means also a struggle for feed to maintain their quality, especially with how humid we are over here. Mold, it happens very fast. And also there's a lot of invasive species of rhino beetles. So these are all things that could influence the livestock industry. Yeah.
Wow, and I truly admire your passion because it really I mean you need to be passionate about the meat industry and I think right away, I mean what keeps you moving, what makes you wake up, because I think I've seen a lot of challenges, but
Yes,
I
yes.
think you
Well,
you wake up every day and try to help. So
I refuse to believe that we can't make agriculture work over here on Guam. I mean, you've mentioned before, I come from another subtropical island in Taiwan, and a lot of time we face very similar issues, you know, uh, not efficient land, not producing our own feed, not having our own genetic stocks. A lot of these in Taiwan, also rely on import. But in Taiwan, we're able to keep our self-sufficiency fairly at a very reasonable percentage, and then also our products at a very reasonable price. And when you meet these farmers over here on Guam, I mean you'll find a similarity with a lot of livestock producers. These are stubborn, but very resilient, very resourceful, and they have the passion of what they want to do. And for me, it's really hard to look at them and say, well, there's nothing I can do. If they're struggling and they're really making a life out of it, and even though, with quite a bit of neglection or underserved for 20, 30 years, they're still at it. So, it's hard for me to just turn my turn turn away and say, well, this is not going to happen. And even though like I'm here as an animal scientist, but I also get involved with many different things, such as like people come asking me about wild hog issues just because I'm an animal scientist. They think I know about these kind of things, and also a lot of people come and ask me about stray dogs or community dogs issues. Again, these are common things, but just because we're so under hired, so it also kind of gives me the opportunity to broaden my horizon, And I try to be very careful about not say yes to everything because
Overcommitting.
if you
Yeah.
yeah, overcommitting.
Overcommitting.
Yeah, because I do want to make sure that I'm taking care of the people that I can, but I try to get involved as much as possible. So yeah.
How do you balance research? I mean, because you're under your university, and even though you go through electricity outage and food supply issues and helping meat processors, you still have to go back to the lab and how do you do that?
To say it's challenging is a understatement. Put it that way. I guess it comes back to your work ethics. You can always squeeze more time out to make things happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of time, when I was in the States, under Dr. Newman, we were looking at collecting sample size such as up to thousands, like five, six, seven, 8,000 of pork chop data and things like that. And over here, it's actually, it's the same, but on a way smaller scale. You have to have the right expectation. And often over here, the faculties or the universities, they know the struggle that their employees are dealing with. So as long as you can provide enough evidence saying that you're really contributing, you have, reasonably good publication activities, and then you have data to support, then the university would acknowledge that your effort. And because on Guam the challenges is very I would say it's still fairly different than the States, not only just say with these power outage after the typhoon, power outage or power surcharge is so common over here. Our equipment also needs maintenance like a lot sooner than a lot of other areas. But because we're so far, so the maintenance group or the support group doesn't necessarily come here. We're
Yeah.
not their favorite place to be at. So even with challenges like this, and then also the cultural difference over here with the students employee, and then also their training compared to the States. These are all things that we face. But I think a lot of time it comes back to setting your expectation at the right area, and then also there's nothing wrong with providing or going back to the basics, providing solid data, no matter if the numbers are smaller or if these are not the most novelty research. It doesn't matter. It's something that is actually produced over here on Guam, and it actually represents over here. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Perfect. Well, we're almost getting to the end, but I have enjoyed very much this conversation because I think it's important for us. I mean, we live in the States and we're lucky to have everything here. I mean, if it's not far, you get maybe 5 minutes driving, and you go to the store, you get food, you get fresh water, but sometimes there's challenges like you're saying in some places that if a natural disaster if a natural disaster occurs, sorry, I mean this happens. So I think it's one of my I guess expectations for us is just to keep having those conversations not only with faculty in a meat science program in the United States, but also a faculty like for example in Guam or in Puerto Rico, that folks that studied here in the States but went back to in the case of Dr. Dominic, she went back to Puerto Rico, her country, but you went to Guam. So I'll get into the end, but I would like to ask you one last question. So looking at 3, 5 years from now, what do you think is going to happen? Looking at the trend, speaking in the meat industry, and do you expect more slaughterhouses or the meat industry expanding, or what do you see in again? What's your expectations from like looking at 3 years from now?
I think there would be, livestock industry has always been a very hot topic. It's essential it's a big part of our diet, no matter if you're a meat eater or not. And regardless of where you're at, I think it's a industry that's essential, you know. And with that being said, over here on Guam, we've had a lot of time where we were wondering if it makes sense or if it's sustainable to do that over here. But now that kind of debation has it is already in the past because ever since COVID or Marwar and things like these, once again it comes back to like putting a lot of emphasis on the importance of food security on the island, and not only just for our island, but our neighbor islands too. So we're seeing more and more farmers trying to go full time, into into this industry, and I have good hopes. It's just a matter of if we are able to uniform our resource over here, and if the industry are able to try to move forward or improve as whole rather than competing against itself. That's kind of how I see it. Um, with that being said, there's a lot of things that could happen and that actually contributes to, if the industry can prosper or not. And I still believe that one of the things that are big is, in the past, Guam has turned away from agriculture and looked into tourism. But now, from COVID, tourism dropped. And just as we're about to recover, Mawar typhoon happened. So now we're back to zero again. So I believe in the future, there's going to be a lot more effort and resource poured into agriculture just because we realize that, what may seem to be very for granted could just be gone and for a good 7 months. And regardless if you're in the agriculture industry or not, if you're in the tourist industry and people don't come, that's a very big issue. And essentially all of these labor force needs to go somewhere or find something to do to be productive. So I still have strong hope for agriculture over here, but a lot of other things may help or may be against it, such as tourism. Now we're trying to combine the both together. So trying to do agriculture, farm tourist plans, trying to certify tourist farms that are tourist friendly. And these could be additional niche marketing. And that also includes a lot of our products over here on Guam. The local people over here have very unique palates compared to the States or to a lot of these other tourists, which predominantly comes from Korea, Japan, or Taiwan. So they have their own unique uh, cuisines
Yeah.
that can really draw a lot of these tourists. So I'm still fairly optimistic, and I think we'll get there. It's just a matter of time, and just keep going at it while we still can, right?
Well, thank you very much for all you're doing to supporting and strengthening the meat industry in Guam. And the meat industry, I think we all have a grain or a small effort to help the meat industry in general, the global meat industry, and I really admire you for that. Appreciate your time, Dr. Liu,
Mhm.
for being here with us today. And hopefully we get to see you next year in RMC in Oklahoma.
Yes, yes, I'm super excited about RMC. I'm actually just going to start a new project. So we're gonna test a lot of pork quality on these wild boars on Guam. Um, yeah, even though, we this is something like I wouldn't say unique of its own, but over here there is a higher population people that tries to hunt out these wild boars. So we're gonna do some, quality testing and also safety testing. And I'm excited to see what kind of data we'll find over here and share with, the meat industry in the States. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Thank you and take care. Thank you, guys.